And now our interview with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, the father of Reaganomics and the former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan.
I'm Paul Craig Roberts. I'm a former Assistant Secretary of the United States Treasury for Economic Policy. I was an associate editor of the Wall Street Journal, a columnist for Business Week, and Script Howard News Service. I'm currently a columnist for Creators Syndicate in Los Angeles. I'm an academic. I've held positions at Stanford University, Georgetown University, and other places. We have lost the law, and by that I mean the law that protects the innocent from the power of government, the law that is a shield of the people instead of a weapon in the hands of the state. And when you lose the law, you lose your civil liberties. And that means you have lost the Constitution. And another serious problem that we are suffering is the collection of power in the executive branch to the exclusion of the legislative and judicial branch. And so we are seeing grow up before our eyes dictatorial powers in the executive branch of the government. The Tyranny of Good Intentions was titled by me, How the Law Was Lost. And the book is about the destruction of the rights of Englishmen, which we know as the Bill of Rights, the legal principles that protect the innocent, that serve as a shield. And we are seeing all of these eroded, and law is becoming a weapon in the hands of the state. And this book documents that for each of the protections among the Bill of Rights. It shows the erosion through prosecutorial abuse, various judicial rulings, and how Americans today do not have the protection of law. Perhaps one of the main contributing factors was that you had all sorts of agendas, single interest agendas, people chasing after devils. We got to do something about drugs. We have to do something about child abuse. We have to do something about crime. And so they made the mistake that Sir Thomas More warns against in the play A Man for All Seasons, that if you cut down the law in pursuit of your agenda, what do you do when the devil turns around on you and you've lost the protection of law? And that's exactly what has happened. We had various individual agendas that were deemed to be very important. For example, we have to do something about the mafia. We have to do something about drugs, and so on and so on. And so each one of these agendas, by pursuing it, eroded protective features in the law, and so the law was lost. The rising police state is already a product of losing the law, of the protective features of the law. That automatically gives you a police state. And in addition, we've had all the fear engendered by 9/11. And this fear was used for an even heavier assault on the Bill of Rights, the assault on habeas corpus, which prevented indefinite detention without charges. We've lost that right. All the due process rights, all the procedural rights that make it possible to enforce civil liberties. You can tell somebody they have a right, but if you take away the procedural mechanisms by which that right is enforced, they don't have the right. The erosion of our legal protections began long before 9/11 or the Bush administration. It was already moving along, and that made it easier then for the Bush regime to use 9/11 for an even fiercer assault, and that's where we stand today. Generally, when governments get powers, they don't roll them back, and we've not seen the Obama administration roll back any of the powers that Bush and Cheney claimed. I can remember when the police viewed themselves as the public servants and as protectors of the public. But in recent decades, the police have been militarized, and they now see the public as the enemy. and we see this in the enormous number of instances of police brutality toward people. Needless brutality. There'll be beatings, taser people for which there's no reason. And so what does this mean? It means that, again, the police agencies of the state, enforcement agencies, now view the public as an enemy, not as something that to which they are accountable. So it shows, again, the breakdown in accountability of executive agencies to the people. And, of course, the police are now probably as dangerous to the public as criminals. And part of it, of course, was unleashed by the breakdown in the protective features of law. Because when, for budget reasons, you need to solve a lot of crimes or pull in a lot of people, they start planting drugs on people. The wide range of police crimes grew so that they could have more and more success in convicting people. So it's now something that's turned against the people, and perhaps is on the verge of doing so in a big way. If there's some sort of social breakdown, the police will probably be a danger to the public rather than a protector. Some jurisdictions apparently even have helicopter gunships and tanks, and they've got rocket-propelled grenades, and it's an amazing array of weapons for police, which are essentially supposed to be an investigative force to solve crimes and make a case against whoever committed a crime and present it to the prosecutor. That's what the police are supposed to do. But they're becoming like an occupation force. And they're undergoing military training with military weapons. This is an enormous departure from the role of police in the United States or in any democracy. The executive branch gained the power to write the regulations that implement the law, and so in effect they gain the power to write the law, so that when Congress passes a bill today or a statute, what it really is it gives some executive agency the right to write the law by how it interprets it with its regulations. So Congress has lost essentially its legislative power back in the New Deal. And then what we've seen recently with the Bush regime is how Congress just acquiesced time and again into executive claims that it was the superior branch of government, and that Congress was there, but it wasn't really on an equal basis, and that the power of the president exceeded that of the power of the Congress and of the judiciary. So that you had an executive making claims that they were above the law and not bound by the law. And we saw the memos that came from the Department of Justice, John Yoo and the others, that basically said the president is not bound by the United States statutory law against torture, and nor is he bound by the Geneva Conventions that we've signed and essentially originated against torture. He's not bound by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. He can spy on Americans without a warrant, even though the law says he can't. These kinds of claims elevate the president into a dictator. And then they use signing statements and various executive orders and directives to accumulate more and more power. And it's true, no president yet has tried to exercise all these powers at once, but they're there. And anytime there's a crisis that they can hide behind to use as a justification, then you now have enormous powers that the president can claim that were totally foreign to the Constitution, to the Founding Fathers, and to most of our experience. The American Empire took on new meaning after the collapse of the Soviet Union and began behaving aggressively, and it let the neoconservatives start preaching empire in a new way, by which it means to them U.S. hegemony over the whole world. You know, that we simply rule the world, and they had not just military justifications for that, but they had these justifications that we are an exceptional people, and that we are the virtuous people, and so we not only had the right, we had the responsibility, the obligation to impose ourselves on the world. So this form of empire is new. The funny thing about this new empire is it's coinciding with the beginning of large-scale jobs offshoring. So while we are telling ourselves, hey, look, we are this new world empire, there's nobody to block us, we're sending all the manufacturing jobs to China, all the middle-class engineering jobs, the software engineering jobs, the information technology jobs, everything that people were using to rise up, to have upward mobility and to have a strong middle class, we start destroying that. So we are destroying one of the bases for being powerful, just at the same time that we get this notion that we are. And the same with the dollar. We start then, because of all the offshoring, the trade deficit explodes. You see, if you take production that you're making in the United States and you move it abroad, you've destroyed it here and you've created it to wherever you moved it. It's now Chinese, for example. When it comes back, it's an import. And so the offshoring creates huge trade deficits. Well, and that then puts the pressure on the dollar. So that's the funny thing about this new neocon version of empire, that it rose up right while we were destroying the middle class, the manufacturing base, the engineering jobs, the middle class jobs, and the dollar. We're destroying the dollar in the process.